Koibu. More of a campaign building question here. For example, in Zweihaard, you made a plot of rising Cyclops and the demon invasion. I'm good at making a goal-oriented campaign, but fall short of generating content in between. What is the process on creating those, and how can I incorporate it into my campaign to make it more dynamic? Fantastic question. This comes from having running two things in your brain at the same time. And the one thing is what is our campaign about? And the other thing is what else is happening in the world that doesn't really matter? If you were running a campaign set in the modern everyday world and you're I don't know what you're doing. You're doing something in America. Your characters are rafting down the Colorado River. And maybe that's their jam. And then your DM is it's a real world. All of a sudden, war breaks out in the Middle East. And that's an interesting detail to add to your world, and it makes it more alive, and it feels more realistic. And it may or may not have an impact in your story. And that's what we're doing here, is we're keeping in mind the things that are happening in the world and the things that are happening in the story, and they're two separate things, right? And every now and then they'll intersect. If your characters are on a river rafting campaign, and they're in the United States, well, then war in Middle East isn't going to be that big of a deal. But if their next objective is we're going to go river raft down the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, well, all of a sudden war in the Middle East is going to really impact their river rafting decisions. And so if you want to bring your world to life, think about what's happening in the world in general. Weird shit that doesn't really impact the players or might not impact the players. And you got to bring it up in ways that may or may not impact them. Zweihaard, for example, did end up having impacts from Cyclops is rising out of the ground, but there were a bunch of other things that are mentioned in the background that don't end up impacting the campaign. Any ideas that you don't use for the campaign, you can recycle and have apply elsewhere in the campaign world that the players hear about. If you're thinking oh, well, maybe there's a necromancer in this region, but then you decide that the main big evil guy isn't going to be a necromancer because, that's not what we want. We really want some sort of interdimensional demon is going to be the bad guy. Then have some rumors about a necromancer happening somewhere else. You didn't use the necromancer idea, but let's just throw it in as a background detail somewhere else in the world. And so maybe that can help you incorporate extra campagnular details. Next question is Sunian. Hey, Koibu. How do you deal with excessive player paranoia? I run a game of Delta Green, cosmic horror set in the modern day, similar to Call of Cthulhu, and my players are paranoid about every single player character they meet. Generally, the NPCs they meet are kind and helpful in their investigation, but they see shadows where there are none. It feels like they have latent fear from other games they've played in. Any idea how to get players to just dive in and go for it? You need to establish trust with them. Keep having your NPCs be helpful. Don't have any betraying or lying or sneaky NPCs. Just give them NPCs that they can trust unless someone is specifically a villain. Make it pretty straightforward. The other thing you want to do is, even though these people are trustful and helpful, you want to present them with lots of perfectly ordinary, normal, fine situations that are presented in slightly sketchy ways. We're going to take the bushes example. If you're a fan of my content, you've heard about this example. You've probably seen it in a few campaigns. This is something I often introduce in the very first session of a campaign. It's usually the first encounter if I'm going to introduce it at all. The players are off on an adventure. They're heading down the road out of town when they see a bush to the side of the road start to move. And it's moving, it's shaking, and we stop the party right there. And I just say, the bush jiggles, there's something in that bush. And then the party might call out to the bush. They might stop and investigate the bush. But if they investigate it, I stop them and say, well, what do you mean by investigate? Do you mean just look at it from afar? Or do you mean walk up to it and open it with your hands? Or do you poke it with a stick? You ask the party some broad questions. And if the party's paranoid, which they always are, they'll be very, very suspicious about this bush. And when they call out to the bush suddenly stops moving and stops shaking. Now our players are very concerned. They might fireball the bush. They might shoot at the bush. They might run up and stab it with a spear. Inevitably, they attack the bush in some way, shape, or form because it's a suspicious moving bush. But inside the bush is just a pair of people who have escaped the town to get it on in the woods or to make out in the woods, or some sort of amorous couple who has hidden themselves inside of a bush for very ordinary, plebeian, non-dangerous reasons, and they have every reason in the world to try and hide and be quiet and not look at the party and not draw any attention to themselves. And so they're doing something in the secrecy of the bush, but it sounds suspicious to the party. And so this party inevitably attacks it and destroys it and kills them. And then when they go through the bush, oh my God, it's a naked couple. Their clothes are right there. They were clear. There's some wine glasses. There's some flowers. Oh my God. It was Valentine's Day. Oh my God, we just accidentally murdered some people in a bush who were just like doing their own thing because we were so paranoid, right? So you throw one of these at them. You don't let, no consequences. It's fine. They kill these people accidentally out of their pure paranoia. They move on. This never comes back to haunt them. Next, there's a guy on the road. He's got his cart pulled off to the side and he's selling something weird, something a little unusual. He's selling ale on the side of the road, in the middle of nowhere by himself. Hey, strangers, would you like an ale? The finest ale in all the land. Come on, strangers. Everybody stops and has a drink at my tavern. Is he suspicious? No, he's just a dude selling beer. When the party agrees to move on, which hopefully they do, you mention another thing that they come across. Yes, there's a pair of armed guards at the bridge. They say that there is a 1 copper per head toll to cross this bridge, and they're wearing the signs and sigils and banners of the local lord. It's a totally ordinary situation. It's guards who are charging a toll to cross the bridge, a totally normal thing. But you present your players with ordinary thing after ordinary thing after ordinary thing until they're like, okay, the DM's just fucking with us. These are ordinary things. Yeah, we pay the 1 copper and we move on. We don't really give a shit. It's not a lot of money. You got to keep it low. If they're charging an exorbitant amount of money, if you give the players a reason to fuck with the guards, they'll fuck with the guards. So you give them no reason. You make it really easy just to pay the small fee and move on with your day, right? You can make it really easy to ignore the guy selling beer on the side of the road. Super easy. Situations that the players can absolutely walk away from. But if they're suspicious, they might turn into some bullshit. And after a couple of these things, you give them an actual encounter. As you're walking down the road, there's a roar and a howl, and stepping out onto the road is a rabid dog. In fact, it's a pack of rabid dogs. They're foaming at the mouth. Roll for initiative. Now the party's like, okay, those are ordinary things. This is what an encounter looks like with this DM. And you keep doing that. You introduce ordinary characters on the side at random, ordinary things, ordinary conversations with ordinary people. Your party's walking down the road. I roll some dice. Yeah, there's a person galloping down the road and they're shouting, make way, as the dust kicks up from behind them. What do you do? And the party's like, well, we make way. All right, the rider runs right on past you. It ignores you. Cool. That's all you see on the road that day. That's the only thing of note. Moving on. You know, you throw in ordinary shit from time to time. So the party gets a sense that this is a lived-in world where there's things happening and you can stop and look at any given thing and there's a story. You could stop that writer and that writer's got a story. There's something there. You could talk to the guy selling ale. He's probably got a story. Hey, he travels around with his ale cart a lot. He probably knows what's going on down the road. He might have the lay of the land. He might be willing to tell us something about some place. Give the party normal things. And eventually they will learn to trust the normalcy. And that's when you stab them in the back. I'm having trouble making random encounters, specifically initiating them. Do you have a good general rule for how perception checks should work and at what distance the opposing side should spot each other? I'm also having trouble making the encounters interesting. For instance, I had rolled an owlbear in a hilly area and the owlbear spotted them first and just spent a few turns charging straight at them. They had a few turns to prepare, but it wasn't a very interesting encounter. What makes things interesting is the motivation and the flavor. So if it's just there's an owlbear and the owlbear is running at you, It's not particularly interesting. Same mechanical actions, but you tell the players the owlbear is starving. It looks skinny. You know, as the feathers are flapping, you can just see them like pulled close to the body. The owlbear is also like drooling a little bit, like it's really, really hungry. You can see this creature coming at you, and you know that it is starving, and you are its only chance for food. What are you going to do about the ravenous owlbear? And now the players have some more tools to work with. Maybe they just fight the thing anyway. But maybe they try to bribe it with food. Maybe they try to give it a horse and just walk away. There's a lot of options at that point, because now we have a thing to finagle, a thing to play with. The creature is hungry. We don't have to kill it. We could just give it some food. The other thing that can make combat fun is the way that you go about it. So even if the owlbear just charges at them straight away, the way you describe the owlbear in combat, I don't know what edition you're playing, but in 2E, owlbears have like 2 attacks, and if they hit with both of them, they hug for extra damage, or if they roll an 18, they hug for extra damage. And so you could talk about, well, everyone knows the infamous owlbear hug is the most dangerous thing in the world. They're light, they're fluffy, they're wonderful, cozy creatures, but just like a bear, they're incredibly dangerous. And even though you want nothing more than to hug the owlbear's hug is lethal. And so here it comes. If it scores an 18 on this roll, it will give you the most dangerous hug of your life. And, you know, you'll still play combat the same way, but now combat is sort of fun because we're talking about a thing and it's kind of cute and kind of silly and kind of fun all at the same time. So it's not just what happens, it's why and how it happens. So that's what I would give you there.